Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley CEO. I'm really so happy to welcome you today to our event titled Data and the Supply Chain. A huge thank you to ALOM, said it right, for organizing today's event. As many of you already know, ACGSV is the leading business-to-business networking organization in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. We offer an array of networking opportunities with over 14,000 members in 59 chapters across the world. ACG provides local connections with a global reach. Now, our chapter is offering a variety of virtual events in the coming weeks, including tomorrow's event, not to be missed. The event is going to be on networking for today and tomorrow. We also have a discussion on ESG next Tuesday. And then in December, we have our Female Executive Leaders Circle, our Public Board Circle, as well as the C-Circle events. We will let the year ring out with our holiday happy hour. Make sure to visit our website at acgsv.org to see the full calendar of upcoming events. Now, we're excited to get started with our discussion. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator today, Lisa Dolan, Vice President of the Supply Chain Strategy at ALOM.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yvonne. It was what a privilege to be able to present today and have our esteemed panelists on the Data and the Supply Chain channel. Thank you.
Thank you, and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and I'm Lisa Dolan. I'm the Vice President of Supply Chain at ALOM Technologies. And I thought I'd start our discussion on data today by introducing myself and the company, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm Lisa Dolan. I'm the Vice President of Supply Chain Strategy at ALOM. ALOM is a global contract manufacturing and global supply chain organization, and we're headquartered in Silicon Valley, very close to ACG's chapter. And I'm very excited to be able to speak a bit about trends in supply chain, especially as it relates around data, technology, digitization. As we all know, there's a lot going on in the supply chain with a lot of uncertainty due to the pandemic. Customer sentiments about businesses and where they're buying products are changing. There is one certainty, and that is uncertainty right now with everyone's supply chain. And data and technology and digitization can really help all of us in doing that. And so what we've seen is this evolution of supply chain happening. And it started out with incrementally improved visibility into inventory. And then all of a sudden we were able to get data feedback, some demand and predictive analysis, prescriptive analysis. Then came along everyone wanting things customized with multiple nodes within the supply chain, and then prescriptive and demand generation from the products themselves. And then now we have blockchain that's starting to peek around the corner. And really, it's all about bridging that digital and that physical and financial supply chain. And that's where the IoT and the digital revolution are really coming into play for all of us. And that form factor is really starting to change in the types of products that are being delivered and where they're being delivered. And so when we talk about that Internet of Things, there's a lot of supply chain data sources that are coming through. You know, we're tracking the purchases, the when, the where, the styles, and it helps all of us in supply chain with demand planning, localization, and replenishment. We're starting to use that data to see the usage and the frequency. There's a lot of Internet of Things and biometrics when it comes to medical device and those types of products. And it really gives us as supply chain professionals the ability to look at the results and do some additional data analysis. It helps the sales teams with cross-selling. It helps with advertising, and it helps businesses sell through more. And then that data is also giving us quite a bit of information as far as the location, the temperature for temperature sensitive products, very much like what we're seeing or what we saw when COVID vaccinations started rolling out. And then it allows us to look at the status. It allows us as supply chain professionals who rely on equipment to take a look at repair and maintenance status of our equipment. This is especially critical right now with there being so many different supply chain constraints. Repair and maintenance of equipment is only going to continue to be critical for all of our supply chains. And really what we're here today to talk about and where our experts come in is the analytics. It's the heartbeat of our business. It describes what happened, why did it happen, what will happen. It's predictive and prescriptive. What should I do with what the data is telling me? And again, with better data equals better performance. And that's going to help all of us as supply chain professionals. You know, how can I get better data faster than my competitors? And it'll help me to improve the data flow. I need to look at the data flow coming in, get it broader, richer, deeper sets of data to be able to analyze. It's going to require transparency and real-time data from suppliers, freight companies, our suppliers in general, and of course our customers. And we're really going to have to work with our teams to develop visibility into greater sets of decision-making variables and focus on the future moving forward. And really that agility and resiliency comes through visibility and tracking. And how do we set ourselves up for faster decision-making? And that comes from our dashboards, our control towers, and that visibility, you know, and encompassing status as well as the compliance. You know, and the data really provides with faster decision making. You know, our demand for data is crazy or it's non-existent. Then, you know, we're going to be as supply chain professionals relying on it to provide excellence through, you know, business intelligence and using that data to fill the gaps. And using the data is going to really help all of us avoid this supply chain bullwhip effect. You know, it allows us not to overreact like what happened at the beginning of COVID and continues to happen even in the automotive industry. And so with that, I'd really like to bring on stage our data experts. Today, I have Ina from the CEO of 1010 Data and David, the CEO of Proximo. And I'd really love to delve into this data and how we as professionals can use that. And so Ina, how about you start off and introduce yourself, your company, give me a little bit and the audience a bit of a background on your journey through data. And then
Thank you so much, Lisa. So I'm the CEO of 1010 Data. We are 21 years old. It's a company out of the East Coast. We have offices in New York and New Jersey, though we do have employees in California and all over the US, as well as the customers all over the country, in UK and in Mexico. 1010 Data provides retail analytics for both in-store and e-commerce. We provide a comprehensive view of customers' journey online. How do the customers buy, what they look at, what they click on, where they live if they go, based on alternative data. And we also have a big part of our business dedicated to the data collaboration, basically, and exchanging data between the retailers and the CPG providers. And we will talk more about it in the next few minutes. The company originated after 9/11 when the company publishing New York Stock Exchange trades perished in the twin buildings. And there was a need to rapidly integrate data and bring it from multiple data sources in the same place. So and the first contract with NYSE started on a handshake before the founders were actually able to register the company because there was such an urgency. And that talks to the strengths of the platform of 1010 data. We have a platform that allows to crunch a lot of data in real time and provide ad hoc analytics as opposed to pre-written applications. And we moved from just servicing fixed income to bringing the same strengths of data to the retail and CPG later, right? But we are remaining the big fans of everything data related. It's even in our name.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ina. David, how about you introduce yourself and Proximo and tell our audience a little bit about you and your company.
Be happy to, Lisa. So I am David Ricciardi. I'm the CEO of Proximo. I've got Ina beat. We're 24 years old, so just a little bit older. So when we deal with data and data analytics, so we work in three key areas. We do a lot of business intelligence, a lot of predictive analytics. That's where most of our conversations with our customers start. You know, everybody's got questions, everybody wants answers. So we do a lot of work, you know, in that area. But we also have substantial lines of business that are around data warehousing and integration. So bringing all data together so that you can actually use it to analyze. And then we also have a practice that's around data strategy and data governance. And usually that's, you know, trying to determine where I am with data and where I want to be. And what does that plan look like, and how do you actually implement on that plan? But all of these things really kind of come down to really what we like to call intelligent information. So how do you take data you've got, data that you can acquire, and turn it into something that is something you can use in the business? And so for us, you know, when we're working with our customers, we can take them, we can collect the data, we can see what they've got, we can, you know, clean it and put it all together, and we can do predictive modeling, machine learning, a lot of things like that. But where we really try to specialize is in whatever subject matter we're talking about with our customer. How do we turn that into insights? So, you know, that's really kind of making that jump from like a predictive model, a mathematical formula, to something a human being can understand. Because for us, it all comes down to understanding what the data is telling you so that you can feel confident in it and then take action. Because if you don't take action, really, it's all just a mental exercise, and you're not really having an impact on your business. So we work with a lot of different types of businesses. We work with manufacturers. We work quite a bit in CPG and automotive. We've done healthcare and pharma. You know, we can work in a lot of different disciplines because the underlying methodology about the way in which you know, kind of crunch and interpret data, you know, there's a lot of commonality across those types of things, those types of supply chains, kind of regardless of what the supply chain is sometimes. I won't say that in all cases, but, you know, there's more, sometimes there's more similarities than there are differences, so.
Absolutely, and every business today can use some analytics and helping it to succeed. Ina, I think let's start with you in your background and with the consumer and CPG. COVID over the course of the last year really significantly changed what and how consumers are buying. What are some of the surprising things that you have found changed year over year? And are there any data strategies that companies can use to try and predict what the next big trend will be?
Lisa, thank you for asking, because the changes in consumer demand have been profound. And we all know about the customers shifting from buying services to buying more products, and we all are very much aware about the exuberant growth of e-commerce. Thanksgiving went online last year. The purchase of cranberry sauce online tripled. People started buying groceries online, even when they swear they need to try their own tomatoes, right? They realize, well, they can come to store, but they also can order a lot of standard packaged goods online, and different types of different channels, different types of servicing customers like buy online, pick up in store grew significantly. But as always, there were some unpredictable winners and losers of the change. And of course, when you start thinking about why, it always comes to the same thing. We change the lifestyle as a society. We changed it towards spending more time at home, kids spending more time at home, families spending more time at home. So one of the things that surprised me last year was that the phone charges dropped by 30%. Well, and we're talking about online purchases, right? The stores are maybe a bit more difficult to track, but think about this. That's not unusual. We stopped losing phone charges during travel and gym visits, right? Yeah. So that was predictable, but still surprising. We saw a huge growth in the toys purchase in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to toys purchased in 2019. You would think Christmas is Christmas. Parents want to make it nice and give toys to the kids. And yet the purchase of toys online jumped 48%. Games and puzzles went up 62% in the fourth quarter of last year. And again, we're talking about online commerce. So some of it probably shift from in-store purchases. But it's also an indication of kids spending more time at home during hybrid or at home schooling, being more in need of entertainment, as well as families spending time together. So games and puzzles actually had a big revival last year. As always in retail, it's interesting to look at big retail events and see how things change year to year, right? And we just went through the big event, which is back to school. And now we can talk about the changes from 20 to 21. You would think, okay, we're still in pandemics. What has changed? Well, last year in August, September, as teachers and students alike were gearing up for in-home remote training, it was all about laptops. Laptops online grew 122% in 2020 year to year. Just think about this, right? That's a huge jump. And that number went down by 23% this year because we're all loaded up on laptops. Well, new students still need to get them and we need some upgrades, but overall, we probably have set our workspaces. But this year, the back to school was the year of a backpack. And just think about it. We didn't get backpacks to kids a lot last year because there was nowhere to go and nothing to pack, right? And now with those backpacks being old and have this joyful event, you meet the friends, you want something nice. And we saw 89% of the backpack growth during back to school in online sales year to year in 21, right? Well, last year they were declining. Last year they were minus 27%. So there are certain categories that also change, and we keep talking about COVID, but there are other changes in the society and lifestyle. One of the things I want to call out is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a vegan for 4 years, so I can call out healthy foods, right? So first of all, meal kits jumped 121% in sales in 2020. And again, it's quite reasonable, right? We all cooked all the same 5 recipes or 50 recipes during lockdown. At some point, people said, I want convenience and I want something different, right? And getting service in a restaurant is not always easy. Some were closed. There are certain concerns about health. Meal kit jumped up. Healthy food had a huge jump. So plant-based, I promised you the vegan numbers, plant-based food grew by 148% in online sales in 2020. That's 2.5% increase in sales. And of course, it's not just COVID and buying online, right? It's the trend in the society related to health conscience and climate change concerns and strong vegan movement. So we see other trends shaping it. So what does it do to the data? I can go with the numbers for a very long time, but I know I have to stop and let others talk. So what it tells us is you cannot really plan demand based on the last 52 weeks of data, right? You have to get data in real time and track those changes in real time based on the last week and the week before. And online sales may be a great indication of what happens in store, but in reality, to have a proper omni-channel planning and feeding the supply chain, you constantly have to monitor granularly online and in-store sales and make those hard decisions and transfer them into the supply.
Yeah, as a supply chain professional, it gives me hives, right? To go from that huge swing to the other in demand, right? Because of the raw materials. David, as organizations are trying to analyze their supply chain risks, what are some of the methods they should employ when looking at that data?
Right. And I think the topic of supply chain risk is, pretty timely since there's a lot of that going on the past few months. So I see. But I would say what you really want to do is you want to, kind of look at the methods that are first going to really help you kind of segment your supply chain. I would draw the analogy, when we think of like consumer marketing, for instance, you wouldn't just say, what are my customers doing? You have different pockets of customers that are going to behave differently. And so it kind of, makes sense to do the same thing, with your supply chain as well. And you can do there's a few different methods you can use for that. So, you might want to like classify your suppliers based upon how much risk, they could actually be providing. And if you look at it on a very simple, like a two axes, what's my volume of business in terms of transactions and what's my volume of business in terms of dollars, you can kind of break it down into, a couple of, quadrants. You've got a group of suppliers that you rarely transact with for low dollars. Yeah, you could analyze it, but you're not really going to get a lot of juice out of that squeeze. At the other end, you've got, people that you're contracting with all the time and you're spending a lot of money with. That's where you really look at. And in the other two categories, you can get, you can get a fair amount of activity there as well, but you might want to treat those separately. But another way to kind of look at that is, to kind of, do what we would call like a factor analysis. And, if you think about just having a lot of different data points around your suppliers or your individual supply chains, whichever one you happen to be analyzing, I can get into a whole conversation about asking a proper question as opposed to a confusing question, because that's often a big problem with data analytics. But assuming you've got a very tight question and everybody understands what you're looking for, that factor analysis, can help you look at all of the different transactions you've got and find which ones are performing like other ones, which will kind of give you like natural segments that you can be looking at. And then for each one of those groupings, you can then do a different kind of analysis. And those could be like a typical regression, model where you're looking at a data point and trying to find out, is this data point positive or negative in terms of correlating to risk? But, when you've got like hundreds of variables, that model may not work for you. So that's where more modern techniques, machine learning can come into play, where you're, saying, all right, let's look at a whole bunch of data elements in this one segment that I'm looking at, and try to sort through them and find out the pattern in variables that are really predictive of some sort of outcome. So, if I'm looking at a group of suppliers and, some of them fail to deliver on time regularly and some of them, normally deliver on time, what are the data correlations that let me predict if a new supplier that's entering the supply chain is going to look like the good or the bad? I'm kind of oversimplifying there, but those types of predictive modeling using machine learning and the factor analysis can be very, very important in terms of determining, where are your pockets of risk, and maybe how are you going to replace the ones that are risky, but if you bring in the new ones, are they going to be any better? So those are things that really can be done around this topic of risk.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. There's so much data, and I think we all almost have to use that machine learning just to get through all the data.
Yes.
And as we talk, Ina, about, as David mentioned, is that supplier going to deliver? CPGs are levied, and a lot of us, and it rolls downhill in the supply chain, are levied with, heavy fines when there are back orders and when they occur. How can consumer data be used to level load inventory at retailers to try and avoid that bare shelf situation and stay on top of that demand?
So every year there are millions of dollars paid by CPG manufacturers to retailers because of out of stock. And this is way before we had 70 ships waiting to enter Long Beach port, right? And all the delays with supply chain. Today, the situation gets worse, and we all know there are lots and lots of empty shelves. One of the things, and I probably will talk a little bit more than just the consumer data here, because that problem requires a much more granular use of data to solve. First of all, we start seeing some retailers who previously did not find CPG for the stockouts introducing fines starting 2022, because they have discovered that by being nicer, they actually get deprioritized when it comes to the decisions of how to split the truck of toilet paper across different stores, right? So one thing that we do for some of our big retail chain clients, and we service some very big retailers, Family Dollar, Dollar General, we're talking about household names. And one of the things we do for them is host their data sharing between them and whole set of CPGs who sell products in those stores, hundreds and hundreds of CPGs. So one of the things we started doing is the analysis of on-time and full delivery, because if the retailer doesn't know how the CPGs fare, it's very difficult for them to react. And we also start sharing that data with the CPGs because they need better prediction, right? During COVID, we introduced additional reports to help both retailers and CPGs to cope with the very fast changes, such as no scan products, right? There are some products that suddenly stopped scanning. What happened, right? Well, if you can have a granular view and look at it store by store, and if you see if this product is sold online, you can say what happened. People stopped buying that product. Well, that may happen, as we heard about the phone charges, right? Or did the people still buy it, but a certain store is out, and now it's time to replenish, right? And with a very granular view of data, we can give you the granularity of even down to a cachet lane should you go back and replenish. So getting that hold of very granular view, what happens in store, and what is your stock in situation, and who scans it. We have predictive analytics reports showing different velocity of running out of products in different stores. During pandemics, we saw a very interesting effect of running out of different speed, depending on the proximity to the hotspot. So getting this type of data and predictive analytics is a must. And if the CPG provider is not yet getting the data from the retailer, it's important to start getting it. And look at the same view and look at the same problem. And of course, this next big question is how you sell the products that are in, how you prioritize them based on profitability, how you make your promotions more efficient, and other ways to use data.
To use the data, that's amazing. And so, David, given the vast amounts of this data being captured and the adaptation of business intelligence tools in supply chain, what are some of the key areas or data feeds that you and your team are focusing on, and what are organizations that you service coming to you for the most?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good question, because there's no shortage of data that's out there, and trying to get your arms around all of it, can be a challenge sometimes. So we find it's useful to kind of break it down into some broad categories. And I think back to that slide you had early on, Lisa, where you were showing the curve, and it kind of spoke to me in terms of the way I think about this, because there's a lot of internal data, and I won't take too much time to talk about that, but if you're in the supply chain, somewhere one of the links in those chains, what you're selling, and what you're acquiring, so you've got those transactions and purchases and how much they cost, and your costs, your actual costs and your true costs, and your P&L and all of that sort of stuff. And then you've got the supplier data and your relationship with your various suppliers, and that's another broad category. And some of those things are generally easier to measure as well, like how quickly do they deliver, your percentage of rejects and things like that, the shipping costs, that's a bank. But when we also talk about supplier, and I'm going to relate this back to your previous question about risk, there's other things that you can consider as part of that data as well, like do they have business continuity planning? Cyber has been a huge area of risk the past few years. So what are their information security policies? Do they have holes in their network that could adversely affect you? Have they been hacked? Yes or no? Trying to find that out could be a little bit of a challenge, but that could be an input as well. And then there's macroeconomic data, which you can get those things that are out there, and those could be not just like GDP numbers and inflation numbers, but, unemployment numbers, labor workforce participation. If you're trying to predict and you're thinking, well, can I stock the factory floor? Can my suppliers do that? If I sell something, does my customer have the people to move it, right. out? You have all of that sort of stuff that goes in there. And my fourth broad category, I'm going to admit, is a little bit of a cop-out because I usually call it other for lack of a better word, but it's all of those things that don't neatly fall into other categories. And, and I will say, I was looking back, some presentations I've given over the past few years, and these things were on here, and I'm like, oh my God, the past 18 months have been a litany of these other things that, kind of got short shrift in the past, but like weather events. Which have been, huge at various parts of the globe. There's geopolitical events. Is there going to be something destabilizing happening that will affect, my supply chain? I actually had disease on there, which I was thinking about, very localized disease, way before a pandemic. But right, exactly. And then here we go. I'm like, yeah, literally, I had that on this is a somewhat of a tangential comment, but it was on a deck that I gave around supply chain analytics in February of 2020. And I'm like, oh, wow, I was 30 days ahead of the curve. So, but, those types of things, if you can collect that into your, think of this big data lake that you're analyzing, the more data you have in there, the more robust your analytics can be in your method of prediction. And the one last kind of thing that I'll say on that is, I will get this question a lot from people, regardless of the analytics that we're doing, when you kind of present somebody with all of these things that they could be analyzing. They'll say, well, how much of this do I have to bring in, or I have to bring it all in before I do the analysis? And that's not the right way to look at it. It's okay to have incomplete data, as long as you are cognizant of the things you don't have visibility into. So if you think about like everything out there as being something you could look at, and if today you're not doing any analytics, you effectively have a wall up and you can't see anything. And it's okay to be looking through a window that's the size of a porthole, as long as you don't think it's a bay window. So that's my analogy for that one. So it's okay to do analytics with only having partial data, as long as you know what it is you're looking at, and you can kind of think about what your blind spots are.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you said earlier, and are you asking the right questions? Mm-hmm. And I think that becomes the really difficult point in all of that. So Ina, where AI is being used today, where is it being used to add value to the consumer or the customer? Because there is a lot of data that you are collecting coming in from all the different retailers and the different revenue streams. And so how is that adding value to the customer or the consumer?
Yeah, so David made a very good point that you don't have to have data about everything. You start with where you are and you keep improving, and you do interpolations, you kind of use data science to fill in the gaps where you don't have the right data, and you narrow the types of outcome. A lot of this work today is done by artificial intelligence. One of the ways, which may not sound very sexy, it's not this beautiful robot talking to you in a store, but very practical and saving a lot of time, is using artificial intelligence and machine learning for data cleaning, right? Because every day we get data from dozens and dozens of data sets coming into the system for retailers to analyze how their sales went, how their assortment was done, how different categories performed, and we'll know garbage in, garbage out rule, right? So if you get the data that is not full or delivered late, you got yesterday data instead of today data. If you don't catch that point in time, your decision will be wrong, right? So checking, one of the things we started doing is using machine learning based algorithms to check the cleanliness and quality of data that come in the stores systems. And we see huge reduction in labor hours and in very tenuous work of checking data quality by data science and data analysts. And we're very happy to say that work, right? People are good in handling exceptions, so the consistency is good to be handled by machine. But then there are some very interesting ways of using artificial intelligence, and this is what's used today in many, many stores around the world. over 70% of promotions fail. They fail for different reasons, right? We do not respond to promotions, or the promotion cannibalizes the product, right? You have promotion for Chobani yogurt, people switch to Chobani, then they switch back. Analyzing which promotion will work for whom is a huge amount of work on a personalized level, right? And it starts with personalization, and even before that, very narrow segmentation. A good example to give is my neighbor and I live in the same zip code, similar houses, same level of income, same age, same size of family. I'm a vegan, she's a meat eater. She eats junk food, I avoid junk food. I have a cat, she has a dog. That already, right? That already spells the differences in buying patterns. How can you find it? Well, you know, our loyalty card that we all beautifully scan to get those discounts in the store actually tells a huge story about our buying patterns. And more sophisticated companies use credit card to connect it to more of a buying patterns and pop patterns online. There are ways to handle that data to create those individual profiles. And to all those concerned about their privacy, no, there is no data anywhere saying Inna Kuznetsova is a vegan, except for my Facebook and Instagram. But if someone looks at the customer number of long chain of figures, they will see that the customer tends to buy vegan, veggie burgers. And if those veggie burgers are on sale, that's a fantastic time to send me a promotion, give me a coupon, I will respond. Then how would you know if I respond better to 2 for 1 or 50% discount? You'll be surprised at the differences in how those two different types of promotion may work in similar segments. How do you find out? You run an experiment. And then you learn from that experiment and you apply it going forward. The problem is no human being, of course, can contemplate this for all the customers of your local grocery, right? Especially a big chain, right? So this is where machine learning comes in and make it very effective. And you may think that this is good for retailers' profitability, which is true, because of course they don't waste time and effort on ineffective promotions. It's wonderful for CPGs who put their dollars towards those discounts and get better returns in revenue. But it's also much, much better for consumers because we feel that the retail store knows us, right? If they don't send me Omaha steak advertising, I don't get offended. And when they send me Beyond Burger, I say, oh, they know me, they know my taste, let me go and pick a few, right? So that actually translates into more higher loyalty, and higher loyalty is good for customers and for the stores, and it translates into more efficient supply chain in the end because there is less waste in the system all around.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the opposite. So while you're getting the veggie burgers, I'm definitely getting the ribeye.
Here we go. We presented it. Right? That's what segmentation is. Yes.
But that's amazing because you're right. I don't really necessarily care about the veggie burgers that are on sale. Yeah. So David, supply chain transparency is becoming extremely important now to consumers, and it's never been more important, and it's never taken center stage like it has until recently. And consumers really care about where and how products are manufactured and who's benefiting from their purchase. What are some of the softer data points that you're seeing manufacturers capturing in the supply chain today? And are they measuring the right things?
Ooh, all right. Well, that's a good question.
I know.
No, it's all right because it is, I think your term about the softer data points, are important there because in some ways it's a soft topic when we talk about the consumer and their visibility into your supply chain from a consumer standpoint. Consumers are worried about things like sustainability, ethical, treatment and things like that. They want to make sure that your handbags weren't made by, 3-year-olds in a plant somewhere and, around the world or whatever else. So the things that you need to do, it's one of those strange areas in that you can, and a lot of companies do, they're monitoring the sustainability in their supply chain. They've got entire groups focused on this. And so it comes down to, what are those things that, that we care about, and how are we actually collecting the data? The analysis behind it is somewhat simplistic reporting. You know, I don't want to, you know, oversimplify, but that's not that complicated. There's not like a predictive aspect to it. It's really what are all the data points that we need to collect, and then monitoring and making sure that, you know, our supply chain is in compliance with that. So, you know, right, I mentioned child labor before, you know, those are some of the things, you know, how are we treating the environment? You know, what's our greenhouse gas emissions, all of those things throughout the, you know, throughout the supply chain. If you can collect that information, the reporting on it, you know, is pretty straightforward. And then those things usually land in your sustainability reports. Now, from a consumer standpoint, I can go a little off tangent here and say not a lot of consumers will read sustainability reports. You know, it's a good blurb for your website. There are, however, investment, you know, funds, which, you know, a lot of people pay attention to where the money's coming from, where they are, you know, making that a part of, you know, their investments, you know, so they are reading those things. But, you know, from a consumer standpoint, it's, you know, it's like that tree falls in the forest. I think a lot of people will assume you're probably doing a good job until the news hits that you aren't. And then there'll be an uproar. So, you know, so really you're tracking that data and making sure that you are doing a good job all the way from sourcing the raw material, even if it's not you that sourced it, it's your supplier, you know, all the way through to the product that you push out the door. You know, I think that is all very, very important. And those data points are really around those, you know, those sustainability, or I should say more broadly, like ESG kind of things, you know, the labor, the environment, you know, CO2 benefits for workers and pay and things like that.
Are they tracking, you know, the economic impact in underserved communities at any?
That is something that, yes, a lot of companies will do. They'll be looking at, you know, that's really more of the aspect of, well, it is a supply chain aspect, but it is really the impact that your dollars are having as you spend them, you know, downstream, right? And so, you know, looking at, you know, who am I spending with? What are the suppliers I'm spending with? How many people does this employ? And, you know, I've seen it more and more, especially in the past, you know, 2 years or so, where a lot of companies are also looking at not just how many jobs are we supporting, but who has those jobs? You know, how many people are we employing in disadvantaged communities, you know, specific underserved communities, to be able to say these are our dollars at work. It's not just the products that we buy that we put in your hands, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, but you know, this is the impact that we're having, you know, with communities that you care about, which are probably also your community. So, so there is definitely an aspect of that involved. You're seeing that at a lot of large companies today. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of emphasis gets put on the data, for the hard data, right? And I think it's important to bring up that soft data points. So, you know, originally when you started talking, and this I find near and dear to my heart, in order for this data ecosystem to work, you really need a high level of collaboration with data sharing. And are you finding organizations more willing to collaborate across industry? And are there any industries that you see holding out?
Yeah, so sharing data is really fundamental for us to create this ideal responsive supply chain, right? We all have this dream of an intelligent supply chain that is flexible and anticipates changes and reacts very quickly to customer demand. But it really starts with getting all the data digitized, every single process, and standardized, and applying optimization algorithms, and then applying machine learning and artificial intelligence on top to optimize in real time, right? And then translate those optimizations and insights into the action. And unfortunately, the supply chains are extremely fragmented. A single container passes five, six logistics companies on the way from the manufacturing site to the stores, right? Someone delivers it, someone packs it, someone delivers it from warehouse to the waiting station, someone waits it, someone loads it on the ship, it gets transshipped, loaded, offloaded, it gets trucked out, and there are many companies going through. And we know that the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So if one of those companies is not providing the status, the visibility, the information, you have a dark spot, right, in your visibility. And then the same happens then when they go to the store, right? The suppliers, the CPG, the manufacturers of the products, they feel almost blind when the products are sold online in the big marketplaces, right? And if they go to the retail and stores, in some cases they do get that information, in others they don't. So what we have found out is, of course, the information is paramount, right? Where most people see boxes, we in IT and data analytics, we see numbers, right? And we say, well, why wouldn't we make all those numbers and data pieces available online? And the truth is that it costs money and effort, right? So it works when both parties benefit from it, right? I think there is a very effective model of monetizing retail data. Retailers have extremely low margins, and getting this small amount, but at 100% of margin, when retailers sell their data to CPGs in a secure fashion and provide them different levels of access depending on their needs. Someone needs photo reports, someone needs 3 reports, right? Someone just needs to see their stock outs and sales figures for the last week, and someone needs to see orphan products non-scanned and differences in performance and comparison against the whole, category and assortment. But those systems exist. We roll those out in just a couple of months. This is one of our specialty. We roll it very fast. Retailers start monetizing data, using that money to pay for their own analytics needs. But most important, they and their CPG providers start looking at the same data. Once they start looking at the same data, this is when they can become very efficient in planning promotions and maintaining stock levels and having all kinds of discussions about planograms and allocations that make both businesses run efficient. Where I would like to see more data sharing is to the other side of the supply chain, in the shipping, right? Because this is where the carriers, the ocean carriers, share track and trace signals, right? But we know that quite often those signals come late in the game, right? And even shipping instructions that go into the bill of lading, 8% of American shippers delay it, and they send those shipping instructions after the ship sails and pay fine for that, right? So it's very difficult to plan anything based on this level of data visibility. And I hope that the rest of the industry players will find that model that includes some money changing hands, but making it more actionable and easy to maintain and help them to get a hold of their data and applying analytics.
Yeah, let's hope that eventually they do come together and collaborate. David, what are some of the things to consider when going into a data analytics effort? Because it's a heavy lift.
Yes. It's a heavy lift, yes, exactly. And I'm going to go back step one. And we said this before earlier, it's having a well-formed question. And, because if you have a bad question to start, you're not going to get any answers, or you're going to get the wrong answer. I've seen a lot of times where you ask one thing and you think everybody understands what you mean, but they're answering a different question, and then everything goes sideways. So, and I actually, I won't go through all the steps right now, but I've got, I can provide this out later on to anybody that wants it. I've got 6 questions about asking a question. And they go through kind of like step by step. It's a method for asking a proper question. It's, what are you trying to get out of it? What's the data that you need? Do you even have the data you need, to be able to answer that question? One of the simple things that's part of that is, what would you do if you found out an answer? And, because some people will scratch their head and go, well, I can't actually make a change because I'm locked into a 5-year contract or whatever. So I'm like, you can answer the question, but it's just, again, a theoretical exercise. You could probably spend your time and money working on something that you can actually change and affect. So I think that's a lot of preliminary work. You don't want to fall into the trap where you just ask something and then a lot of people spin around and start, doing things, and none of it's coordinated, none of it's on point, none of it's heading towards a thing. Every question you ask in and of itself is its own project. So I think that's step one. If you don't get that right, don't bother with anything else.
Don't bother with anything else. Well, I cannot thank you both so much for your time and your knowledge today. It's been amazing, and I thank you for taking the time for the audience, and thank you ACG for having this timely discussion around data in the supply chain.
Thank you for inviting us, and pleasure to partner with you, David. I think we see the world quite the same way through the lenses of data, right?
Exactly.
I think so, Ina. Yes.
The numbers don't lie.
I want to echo Lisa's gratitude. Thank you, Ina and David, and thank you, Lisa, for coming on today and talking about this with our community. As I mentioned before, this recording will be available shortly after today's event, so you can go back and watch it or distribute it to others who you think should take a look. Hope to see you all again very soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.